God of light, salvation, and life, be in my mind and in my thinking, on my lips and in my speaking, and in our hearts and in our beings. Amen. Please be seated. The gospel reading today teaches us and challenges us in multiple ways. We learn something about hens. We learn about friendship and caring for someone, even if we may not always agree. We learn about God's love and commitment to us, and about how Jesus models for us a commitment to God and to God's people, even in the face of obstacles. But first, let's set the scene. Jesus is outside the city of Jerusalem, where he can look over the whole city. And there is this incredible vista of the holy city, the center of Judaism, the place of the temple, the place of the Holy of Holies. And it's also the seat of political power for the Romans, the occupiers of Jerusalem, and the oppressors of the Jewish people. And there are people in place who keep secular and religious order. There's Herod Antipas, ruler of the quarter, placed in power by the Roman Empire. There's scribes and Sanhedrin, the high court of Jerusalem. There's Sadducees, the followers of the written law only, and Pharisees. Now, Pharisees believed in keeping the strict observance of the traditional and written Jewish law. And Pharisees have received a bad name. We, as followers of Jesus, sometimes blame the Pharisees for the sequence of events that led to Jesus' death. And clearly, we see from the Gospels that the Pharisees and Jesus might not see eye to eye with each other on all matters. But remember, from the perspective of the Pharisees, the traditional and written law were the key to keeping Jewish people together. And Jesus has friendships with some of these Pharisees, these people with whom Jesus has had discussions and disagreements with. Those Pharisees come to Jesus and they tell him, you need to get out of here, get out of Jerusalem right now. You need to leave this place because Herod, that fox, is in the hen house. And Herod is on to you and he's coming for you. And why is Herod looking for Jesus? Herod is charged by the Roman Empire to keep the peace in Jerusalem. And Jesus is starting to raise a stir among the people. And Herod is looking at things from multiple perspectives. He's trying to keep the secular peace, and he's trying to follow the law, and he wants the Jewish people to be peaceful. And this prophet named Jesus is speaking out in a very different voice, a voice that potentially can turn the world upside down. Now, today there is a church on the outskirts of Jerusalem that marks the spot where Jesus stood after he left Jerusalem. And it's called the Church of the Lamentations. And it's the place where Jesus wept, where he lamented over Jerusalem. And in the church there is a window, and it's one that faces over Jerusalem that tells the story that foreshadows, if you will, on what is to share, what is in store for Jesus. And then there's a second focal point in the church. And in the church there is a mosaic of a hen gathering her chicks under her wings. How many people here have raised hens? Anyone? Well, if you have, I'm sure you have some good chicken stories to tell. I have some friends who kept chickens on their farm, and I've done my share of chicken chores and had a nasty run-in with a rooster, and also had this opportunity to observe hen behavior. So here's what I know about hens. They are fierce protectors of their chicks. Now, I don't mean in a warrior kind of way. I've never seen a kung fu hen or one that wields a sword or one that has teeth that bite and tear, although you might get pecked once in a while. But hens protect their chicks by spreading their wings and making a place for them underneath. Think of an umbrella. And when there's any kind of danger in the barnyard or the chicken coop, the hen lifts her wings and the chicks scoot right under them. And perhaps the most remarkable example of the fierceness of hens is that if there's a fire in a chicken coop and there's no way out, the hens will gather their chicks under their wings and sacrifice themselves to the fire and smoke. And after the fire, the chicks are often found to be alive under their mother's wings. Jesus longs to gather everyone in Jerusalem up and under him like a hen would do in times of danger. And this is a powerful sign of Jesus' love for the people of his time and also the people of our time, his willingness to perish in the process of saving others, of saving us. This story that Jesus tells us in today's gospel gives us a keener understanding that Jesus knew what his mission was and what would come next: his own death and the cross in Jerusalem, God's favorite city during the time of Passover. Now, Jesus could have fled. He leaves Jerusalem. He could have hid out. He could have stayed out of sight and lived a long life. But instead, he says, I'm leaving Jerusalem right now because I have work to do. I'm healing people. I'm casting out demons. I'm being with people. I'll be away for 3 days, but then I'll be back. And there's also something else going on here, an opposite direction to the rule of Herod and the laws of the Pharisees. Jesus comes and gathers people all around him, including the marginalized and the dispossessed and the rich and the powerful, women and men as one human family, sheltered by Jesus. He heals and he feeds and he nurtures in his ministry, and he doesn't shun anyone. And indeed, Jesus shelters in love and caring. And the other side of this story is what Jesus doesn't shelter. He doesn't shelter oppression or discrimination or bigotry or earthly power. Rather, he speaks out against the status quo, against what hurts humanity, and for a community of love and belonging under Jesus' wing. Just like the hen Jesus speaks about as he weeps over Jerusalem. But what does this mean for us as contemporary followers of Jesus? Reverend Caroline Lewis says that knowing the safety and protection of such a place, God's loving arms, invites us to imagine and live into the person God has called us to be. And she goes on to say that the security of God's love, that in the security of God's love, we are safe. You hear that in today's psalm. We're safe from the harm of ridicule, and we're safe from the harm of rejection, and we're safe from the harm of dismissal, and that is what Jesus is promising us. We're protected under his wings. But that's not the end of it. In Jesus' arms and his protection under his wings, we are called into being to be our authentic selves as well, just as Jesus was called to be his authentic self as the Son of God. He chose what he had been called to do, even though his friends, the Pharisees, were warning him off. They were saying, stay away. And perhaps that is what happens to us sometimes when we're feeling pushed one way and pulled another and called to another as we try to live into the person Jesus calls us to be. And maybe Jesus calls us to weep too, to lament over the injustices and inequities of the world. Maybe Jesus calls us to be the hen, the one who extends our arms to shelter and to heal and to feed, And maybe Jesus calls us to be fierce in our support of caring for others and in this practice of being Christians, of being followers of Jesus. And I think Jesus also calls us to be cared for by God and community, to allow ourselves to be in the arms of God and each other when we need to be, to allow others to help us heal, and to be fed in love and to accept love. I think that's what we learn from today's gospel about hens, about friendship, and about God's love and commitment to us, and how Jesus models for us a commitment to God and community. This week, let us continue to walk with Jesus. Weep with him over Jerusalem and all the Jerusalems of our time, and turn with him to love and care for and heal the world, and turn again to journey with him back to Jerusalem. Amen.